bench. I am pleasured to bring you a special guest this week, as I do every week. I bring you information, I bring you commentary, little funny stuff, and things of that nature. But as the name of the show states, this is Build and Destroy, where I attempt to build up the community and destroy lies and propaganda. This week is a special week for me because, as I've told you several times, what my goal is to give you information about the community that cannot be refuted, that can enrich you. And I want to talk to people of all walks of life. And today we have a special guest by the name of Al Lewis. But before we go forward with Mr. Lewis, I'm going to do what I do every week. I'm going to acknowledge my family. It was taught to me when you acknowledge your family as well as your ancestors send down blessings and protections as you send up respect. So everybody connected to my family, that is the Whitmore, Pollard, Cotton, Turner, Battle, Harper, Bailey, Crisp, Lansdowne, Liggins, Duncan, and you already know my mother, my father, my brothers, and my sisters out of Williams clan. We in the building. Now, as I state every week, this is a podcast. The reason I continue to say that because consistently people say, hey man, I missed your show. Which me and you both know that's not a truth. That's just, hey, I'm just saying something because I don't have anything else to say. Like I'm going to get angry with you or something. And I'm not mad at you at all. I mean, it is what it is, right? But what it is this is a podcast. And the reason I say that is because you cannot miss my show. It is humanly impossible to miss my show because you can go to Spreaker.com, built for this network, and catch it live. You can go to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Castbox, Deezer, or any place that you want to accept what's going on. Now, with that being said, because I am HRap and I do my very best to give you the best information possible, I will introduce you to my special guest, Mr. Al Lewis. Thank you, Al. How you doing, brother?
Man, I'm alive, and I appreciate being that too. How are you doing?
Man, I'm awesome, man. It's awesome to be online with you, man. We've had some great conversations, and I want to share some of that information with my listeners, the people who support me. Thank you to you guys, and thank you especially to you. So, I would like to introduce you to my listeners, to the people who support me on a weekly basis. Please let them know who you are, where you're from, and we can start this conversation. It's not going to be an interview. I don't do interviews. I have wonderful conversations that are informative to me and my supporters.
Well, that's what I like the waltz of the dance. Is I think it extricates what needs to happen, what needs to percolate to the top. But my name is Al Lewis. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm a native Memphian. I've lived here 67 years with the exception of my time in the United States Navy and, of course, working and traveling over the country. I'm a former labor unionist, and that was where I really got involved in community. I mean, there's a lot more stuff, but, man, who likes to talk about this stuff all the time?
That's cool. I like it. Now, with that being said, man, Memphis, I think like we're in the middle of the country, we're in the middle of the map. We really set the stage for the country. Tell us about Memphis and the beauties and the pitfalls, where it is and where you think it's going to be.
Oh man, Memphis is southern, mid-south is what it's called. Just north of Mississippi. It's a tri-state area actually. Our borders border Arkansas and Mississippi. Memphis was established in the late 1800s by three guys, Andrew Jackson, Watkins Overton, and a guy by the name of Winchester. His first name escapes me right now.
Mm-hmm.
It was a trading post. Of course, it grew to be a city. Memphis is a very strange place in that it represented a lot of wealth because at one time it was the cotton capital of the world and the hardwood capital of the world. On Front Street downtown, that's the street right next to Riverside where the Mississippi is. At one time when I was a young person, If you rode the bus down Front Street, you would literally see bales of cotton in front of all the cotton exchange houses down there. I mean, all the way down the street, these huge bales of cotton, and they had brothers who would take samples of the cotton to the different brokerage and exchange houses, and they called that cotton row. Up until maybe say about 22, 23 years ago, that shifted. It is no longer the cotton capital of the world, and you never see the cotton on the streets anymore. But Memphis was a town that has been controlled by the now minority white population, but at one point it was the majority. And when I'm saying control, almost every aspect of life it was a very patriarchal setup with the great white father dispensing jobs and business and license and stuff like that to the black people here, and it still ran like that mostly today. Memphis is close to the poorest city in the nation. Sometimes it's one more kind of thing that it really battles with being the poorest city in the nation. So here's an example of what I'm saying. In 1967, prior to the sanitation strike, Memphis was the second poorest city in the nation. In 2018, the 50th anniversary of King's assassination, Memphis was still the second poorest city in the nation. So everything that King's life meant and helped other cities attain, to some extent, it escaped us all the way. We have a white mayor and a white congressman, and we're probably going to have a white mayor for the unforeseen future. And we are 65% black. So that's to let you know. And so, yes, have we been compromised by people that look like us? Absolutely. 100% absolutely. Yes, sir, we have.
Man, that's crazy, man. How did that happen? Because, okay, I understand, but then again, I understand that happens in Alabama too. Why would you say it is that way? Because traditionally, if you have, logically, I should say, because it's the same way in Mississippi and Alabama, the entire South is like that. But why would you say it is that way when you have most of the people being controlled by the few?
Well, I mean, there's a cornucopia of reasons. I'm sure we could have a whole podcast just about that alone. But some of the things I know that happened here was in 1991 we did unite. One of the first times since '68 that we did unite and elect a slate of black candidates that took over the municipality. And the reason I'm very familiar with it because my mother was a politician and she ran for school board, and she ran on a citywide race. It wasn't just in an area. And she was the first black person to win a citywide race on our school board. So we took over the school board. We elected a black mayor, Willie Harrington. All the other city court clerk, all that stuff, judgeships, everything. We took over. And quite frankly, man, as naive as I was during that time, that was 28 years ago, about politics, I assumed that they would take it and make what it needed to be. I assumed. And but I think we miscalculated the opposition. Because since we outnumbered them by then, even though it was a very close race for mayor, he just won by 142 votes. But it was pretty clear that by the next election that he would win because the numbers were just going up. And I know from my vantage point, I knew my mother, I knew her commitment to what she was doing, and I knew some of the other people because it really felt like this collective effort when we did it, man. Because we helped other candidates. It just wasn't us passing out materials. We helped Harrington. We helped Judge Jane Chandler. All of us did this in a collaborative effort. So it felt good, when we finally did something, we accomplished something. And so I kind of just let it go that they would take care of it. And I think that they tried, but I don't think they knew what they were up against. Man. I'm not just guessing that. I know that they did not know the kind of evil that they would be up against. And a little by little, they began to pick our representatives off. A few years later, they had, but really tore it apart. They had this thing called Tennessee Waltz, after the old song by Patti Page. Sam Cooke did it much better, however. And they set up a sting, and they had somebody appear like they would the discarded computers and all these municipalities that they were going to buy, but then they were giving them under the table money, $5,000-$6,000. They would take them out to dinner. They attempted to do that with my mother, by the way. They took her to dinner, put themselves off as business people. My mother wouldn't even allow them to buy her dinner. She wouldn't allow her. She was one of the few that they didn't catch. But man, they really wiped our senior representatives out. I mean, wiped them out, man. Like 8 or 9 of them went to the penitentiary.
Wow.
Yeah, man. And so that put the fear of God in our representatives. I want you to know the ones that came after them have literally sat at my mother's table and told me that they were afraid to push any major initiatives because the white council people would threaten to put the FBI on them. And the FBI was just as complicit as you and I were talking yesterday about how they did Mayor Harrington, how they tried to entrap him. So, I mean, they have, when you have that kind of power to influence the federal government to come in and do things like this, and I think it was, you see, this is what those representatives have since stated some publicly. Everybody was doing this. I'm not suggesting that's the right thing to do. But they learned how to do it from the white representatives. But the white representatives helped set them up after they taught them how to do it. And so this threw the power structure back, and then they figured out how to engage in racial politics. What they now do, like we'll have a mayor's race coming up. We might have a good candidate, right? But they'll pay 4 or 5 other black candidates, and I know this. I'm not guessing. They'll pay them to enter the race to split the vote, and then they'll just have a white candidate, and he'll win. And they've done it the last 2 times. Not only that race, but any race that they want their person in, and now their person doesn't have to just be a white person. They have plenty of Negroes, and I say that like that, that's willing to do it. And so that was one of the reasons. But here's something else that I like to share with you, and I can say that I was one of those ones that was instrumental in uncovering this. Memphis has been, temporary agencies came and took over in Memphis. And temporary agencies charge $22 for the labor and pay the laborer $8, $9 an hour, right? And about in 2016, visiting some of the young activists who had enlisted my help as being a former union organizer, community organizer, doing some pretty good stuff. Somebody told them about me, and I was in retirement. I was a retired professional troublemaker, and it's serious. That's what they hired me to do. That's what I did for a living. And so this young brother by the name of Kedron Franklin contacted me, and he called me and said, "Hey, OG, I heard you know some stuff about turning some stuff up. Man. You mind if I pick your brain?" I said, "Man, sure. I ain't got much left to pick, but you can have what's left on this old bone back here, right?" Well, anyway, so we got involved, and one night we were at my mother's house, and she kept telling us, "You need to check Memphis Tomorrow." I didn't know what Memphis Tomorrow was, man. I thought it was one of these initiatives where they train people. That is not what Memphis Tomorrow was. Memphis Tomorrow was a consortium of the 32 corporations, the biggest corporations in Memphis, that was brought together by the owner of AutoZone. His name was Pitt Hyde Jr. He also brought Fred Smith, who owns Federal Express or FedEx now, and all of the international paper, these huge corporations, and their mission was to create a non-profit to direct the policies and the actions of the city. That is to influence government, to influence business, and education. It was right on their website. If you go and look right now, they will tell you that was what their goal. They created something called the Memphis Crime Commission, who would write policy for the police department. The edge board that is the engine that gives pilots, that is payment in lieu of taxes, to businesses that are relocated here. They would have wanted the Chamber of Commerce recruit businesses here. The Chamber of Commerce and Memphis Tomorrow are in the same building. It's called the Falls Building on Front Street. But here's where you're gonna love this agent. Going on the other part of their website, because my mother's insisting now that we look at it, we find this part that's inviting the companies of the world to relocate to Memphis because of it pays low wages. And so I'm looking, I said, wait a minute, they're advertising poverty. So we go and look at the Chamber of Commerce's website, and it has the same language, just a little different, but almost identical, man. So the next day, we blew it up. We used our connections with the press, with their Facebook pages, and we just went across and explained, because they were at that time 17 years old. Nobody knew who they were. My mother was the only person that had ever taken them on. And that was, well, anyway, make a long story short, the next day they took all that stuff down. Now you know they were guilty. You get it?
Yeah. The same thing is happening right now in Alabama with Amazon. That's why they're trying to unionize.
Yeah, they better. But we picketed Memphis Tomorrow. We put up information pickets out there, and the president of the chamber, of course, came down to engage us. He's a real smart guy. He was a real smart, hands up move. He asked us, will we meet with him that day? And we said, no, we don't, man. You have to negotiate. But we're not going to meet on those kind of terms. We're not prepared to meet. And so we went, did our homework, came to the meeting, and that was when we began to have some meaningful dialogue on temporary agencies and what they were doing. And we put a lot of information out there for them, very, very well written, well researched information. Because these young people are bright, man. They know how to do stuff that I just don't have a clue of how to do it. And it's so professional, and I think they played us cheap. They just thought we were some people out there with signs. They didn't know we had brilliance within our midst. And I can say today that has changed the entire trajectory of this city. But I'll tell you that as I tell what has happened from Memphis 1967. That was when the sanitation strike started. Kind of some of the stuff, the changes we went through. I'll put it like this, man. I think we have been in shock before King was murdered here. Most definitely since King was assassinated. Because I would ask you to think about what that said to us, that here's somebody that came just to help people get a $1 an hour raise, and you blew his spinal column out, and he died from choking on his own blood. What is that? What message did that say back to us, man? And so there has been no significant effort in trying to really engage this until 2016, when we shut the Hernando de Soto Bridge down. And for 6 hours, and that's when things began to turn rapidly. We won lawsuits, and we have one lawsuit pending in federal court. We just won a lawsuit against the city for spying on us that was illegal. And so, bro, it has been some amazing stuff. Let me say that.
You know what? I'm glad your story took us down that rabbit hole, because I do want the people. Your mother's in politics. You mentioned somebody else is in politics in your family last night. Let's talk about the beginning stages of your life that developed Al Lewis into this man of the people that we see now. What are some of your earliest memories of Memphis? Because I would assume they were great because you stayed. So take me back to the beginning and help the people understand Memphis and how, if they had those same issues, they can galvanize in their communities and improve, so we can improve nationwide.
Well, it goes back, I said 1958. I think I was about 4 years old, on the bus with Sarah Sarton, who's my great grandma. That was really who raised me the first few years of my life. She's a kind woman, but a very firm woman. And I don't mean so much a disciplinarian. She was just firm in her principles. She raised her family to be firm in their principles, and they were very successful people. Her daughter, my great aunt Velma, owned several businesses. She had a chauffeur, a maid, a cook. We lived in a big house, man. It was the biggest house on the street. And right across the street from where my mother's people lived, with my great aunts and my grandfather, was my father's people lived right across the street. And that's 6 boys and 1 girl, mother and a father. And they came out of the projects. But they all had good jobs, but they came out of the projects, if you understand what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And by that I mean is that they were not humble men. They were all over 6 feet tall. They were gregarious and loud, and they was into the life, man, you know. And so, as my dad is fond of saying, nobody would mess with me but a stranger or a fool. It felt like paradise. That was in North Memphis, and my father is probably one of the greatest influences on me. You know, people think it's my mother, but it's really my father is the person that instilled in me about having dignity and principles, and you know, and not holding your head down when some white man came and said something to you. He insisted that just wasn't gonna happen. He was probably one of the most ferocious men I'd ever seen. And I don't mean so far as against me. He just, if he was afraid, I never saw it. God knows that I look, you know, you want to know if your dad is really a tough guy. If he's just showing rage to cover it. But this man I couldn't see it. And I've seen him stand up against the police. I've seen him, I mean, it's just, nor was it in his brothers. And so, that I'm an only child. So now understand, my dad is the youngest of 6 boys and 1 girl. And my mother is the oldest of 4 girls. And all these people in this community loving up on me because I'm the only nephew, the only grandson. You know, so I'm like, I got 3 aunts that love me, 2 great aunts in the house, great grandmother, grandmother, granddad, you know, and that's my second biggest influence was my maternal grandfather. I shared with you yesterday about he was born in 1894. He was born in Memphis. He was raised in Eads, Tennessee, which they called the country at the time. But he would tell he lived with my mother, and I slept in the room with him. We had twin beds, and for 8 years I slept in the room with this amazing person. He was an educated man. He was a travel man. He's a very unassuming, quiet guy, but he told the most wonderful stories, man, about being in France during World War I, where they made the black soldiers watch them hang 8 black soldiers for being in a race ride with some white soldiers where they killed some of the white soldiers. Of course, the white soldiers killed some of the black soldiers. They didn't hang the white soldiers. And he told me that they put guns on them and made them watch the hanging, and I could really see in his face and hear it in his inflection that was still traumatic for him to have gone through. And he was only 16 when that happened, man. And so he would tell me, because he traveled all over the country, he was a hobo. He traveled all over the country, and he was on a migrant farm in Florida, trapped because you had to pay the store to leave. You had to pay your bill off.
Wow.
He was a sharecropper at 14. He was an orphan. At 14, he had his own farm. He had to take care of himself. And so he would tell me, this is why I began to understand about the terror that our people lived through. He told me that out in Hickory within the Eads area, that there was this thing developed that if a brother was walking down the road, I mean, these are gravel roads now, these are horse and buggies, few cars come through. But if a white woman drove up a car or a buggy and said something to a black man, they were taught to scream to the top of their voices and take off running. And that's from having been lynched and hung and shot and arrested and beat so much for having a conversation with a white woman. And so you can imagine how this affects people over a series of years of having grown up knowing that for doing nothing other than hey, boy, come here. Yes, ma'am. And the next thing you know, some neighbors have reported you to the sheriff, and they come looking for you that night. And so he would tell me, he told me this story about down on Bill Street, man, where he saw a police officer knock a black man down, put his foot on his neck, and shoot a ring in his temple. He shot 6 shots in his temple. And, you know, just these horror stories, man, that he would tell me. But then he would tell me about the brothers that resisted. He called them bad. You got me?
Yeah. You can say it. You can say it.
He called them bad niggas, and he loved to tell me about bad niggas, and I loved hearing about bad niggas. See, my dad and them were bad niggas. And my grandfather told me, oh, your uncle, them some bad niggas. Well, my grandfather also told me about those bad niggas, Kimbo Miles. Kimbo Miles was so bad out in the country that if they were coming to arrest him, he said the sheriff came to arrest him, and he told him, no, man, I can't go nowhere. I got crops to get in. You're going to have to come back when I finish harvesting my crops. And the sheriff knew he had to come back because there was going to be some trouble if he didn't.
One second. I want to introduce you to people. For those who just joined, this y'all already know this is the End of the Bench on Built for This Network. I have the pleasure of talking to a good friend of mine, a guy who's becoming a good friend of mine, Al Lewis from Tennessee. We're talking about the beginning, middle, and the end of Tennessee and how he's gonna give us some pointers on what happened in the past. We can tell us what happened in the past. Tell us what's happening in the present and how we can potentially fix the future. Please continue, Al.
So, well, anyway, you know, having that opportunity to be told these wonderful stories by this man and gaining context, which is very important. The word context means to weave with texture. If you look the word up, the etymology of the word is to weave. And he gave me love giving context to anything. You just couldn't ask him a question and he would just give you an answer right quick. At first, I didn't like it. I was like, I didn't ask you that. I want to hear. But after a while, I looked forward to hearing the context that he was giving me. And so it brings us up back to Memphis. Now, I referenced 1958 and being on the bus with my great-grandmother and with groceries in her hand, and nobody would let her sit down. And she was a small woman, man. And I can remember walking down that aisle looking at white men sitting down comfortably and looking at them, and none of them would give her the courtesy of offering a seat. And when she went to the back, it was full, and nobody with the back would. Now, when they said the back of the bus, let me explain something. The back of the bus ain't very big. There ain't very many seats back there. It ain't like you got a whole big old bus back there to sit down. The other thing about sitting on the back of the bus, if a white patron came and didn't have a seat up front, you had to surrender your seat if they came to the back of the bus. So theoretically, if enough white people were on the bus, every black person would have to stand up. And this was just the way it was. Yeah, certainly some people said, I'm not going to stand up, and they went to jail. That's just the way it was, man. I remember distinctly, I don't have to read about drinking out of the colored fountain and the white fountain. I did it. We moved in a neighborhood with this big, beautiful pond right across the street from our house, man. Right across, it didn't take me 30 seconds to walk to the park that I couldn't go in. But there was no white people in the park either. Memphis was such a segregated town. Is that I share this with you. I had one conversation with a white person from birth till I joined the United States Navy at 17 years old. That was it. I knew nothing about how they lived. I'd never been in their houses. They'd never been in my house. I didn't play, talk, go to school with. It was totally segregated. So now we're getting up in the 60s where we hadn't made any significant strides and everything, you know, but there was some things good that happened, like Stax Music had opened up. They kind of put us on the map a different kind of way. Some affluence came because, like, you take, I don't know if you ever heard of Booker T and the MGs. Booker T. Jones stayed the next street from me. William Bell, every day would be like a holiday, stayed down the street from us, man. I mean, I lived less than a 10-minute walk to Stax, and less than a 3-minute drive to Stax Records. And Stax Records was also Satellite Records. They sold records initially, so you could go in there to buy a record and hear them recording in the back. So Memphis was kind of on the upswing in the 60s, and when this sanitation strike starts, right? Mm-hmm. And right prior to that sanitation strike starting, there was we used to play football on this church up on McLemore Avenue, and it had in the front yard, and it had a sidewalk that split the lawn. And so the people in the church, we didn't have to be on Sundays. We didn't do it on Sunday mornings. But people in the church would come and run us off all the time. I mean, we'd be up there having fun. Somebody about to make a touchdown. They stop, niggas leave. We take off running. Well, one day, the preacher came out. And he looked to be a young man. And we got ready to run. He says, no, don't go nowhere. He says, this is what I want you to do. He says, if the ball is on this sidewalk, shift it either forward or rear, because I don't want you all to fall and hurt yourselves on the sidewalk. That's different. Like, wow, ain't nobody never said nothing like that. And you the preacher, yeah. So this cat gave us the little room in the back. There was a little building in the back. He had it cleared out. He gave it to us. Put us a little stereo system in there, and he would meet with us and just talk, but nothing in particular, just about being boys. You got what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Leadership.
Yeah. He had the older guys mentor us, and they would kind of act as security when we had little parties and stuff like that, right? And man, I would wrestle with this cat, because he looked to be in his, I would say, early 30s. I found out he was older than that. But he was very playful, man. He thumped me on the head. It was just a fun thing, man. Well, when this sanitation strike comes, I start seeing this cat on television. And I'm like, what is Rap Jam doing on television? And so next thing I know, somebody says he's invited Martin King to Memphis. Now, if y'all haven't figured out, I'm talking about Reverend James Lawson, who was Martin Luther King's mentor on nonviolence, one of the founders of SNCC.
Yeah, I was just about to say SNCC.
Well, he had moved to Memphis after he left Nashville. The next street over from us was his church, man, Centenary Church. And so just to be, I didn't know who this guy was till I was almost grown, who he really was. He was just Reverend Jim. I got a picture of him and I in 2018 when he came back. He took a picture with me, and I was telling him about those stories when we was young, man. Just a beautiful person. But anyway, when they murdered King, you could really feel the depression. I'm trying to think of that word, hopelessness. Afterwards, I remember walking around the neighborhood. I'm thinking, okay, they killed King, and people got to get together. They're gonna make their last dash and bring their guns. I'm a child. I was 14 years old. I'm thinking, but I remember walking to get a haircut up by Stax. I was going to be able to get a haircut, and old men sitting under the trees playing checkers because it was warm. And I'm just walking up listening to what they're saying because I'm sure I'm going to hear some buzz about get back time. Mm-hmm. And all I heard was defeat. That's all I heard. That's all I felt was defeat. And I was very, very sad about that. But they began to try to bring some revitalization. Map South came, anti-poverty initiatives and stuff like that came. This is when we found out it was the second poorest city because of Lyndon Johnson's effort of trying to end this war on poverty when he got elected. Anyway, 1971 is when I really got involved in something. I went in the United States Navy. They shipped me to the middle of the Mojave Desert in California. And if you thought racism was tough in Memphis, go to the middle of the desert when you're isolated and you're about 3% of the population. And you'll get called some real nasty words out there. Of course, I'm from Memphis. And like the brothers from Chicago, I don't take kindly to taking whoopings for free and being called all them dirty names. And as a matter of fact, one of my good friends, the guy that got me involved in this was a guy from Chicago named Timothy Rube. and he had been there before we had. And I never will forget when I met him. He says, "Hey man, you got you some rocks?" There wasn't no crack cocaine back then. I'm like, rocks. Man, you got to carry rocks in your pocket and throw at these white boys, cause they'll come by and spit at you in their cars and everything. I'm like, rocks? Are you kidding me? Rocks? But he did, and he just told me the stories of what had happened to the sailors while he had been there. Well, I was a different breed of sailors, and I represented a different. These cats had gone in prior to 1968. I came in after 1968. A whole lot of different things was happening on the street when I came in. So the next crew that they sent in after my crew was a brother from the west side of Chicago by the name of Michael Lewis, and we remained friends until he died. Mm-hmm. And Michael was one of them cats that he wasn't gonna take no shit. And it was just the different breed of brothers came in, and right away we found that we better organize. Mm. And that was our first attempt at organizing, and we did, and we fought them hard. We got a lot of significant things changed, but they put every one of us out of the Navy. They put me out the Navy for threatening a bill collector over the telephone. They put my boy from Memphis, my other boy Barry, out of the Navy for being late to work a week after they put me out. This is how committed they were to not having black men organized. Because one of the things I found out years later is what beats a power structure is organization and committed organization. And that was my first attempt at doing it. But I left myself wide open. I didn't know how to defend my flanks. You can't take on the United States Navy and be bogus doing some stuff that'll get you arrested. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Or you can't make mistakes. You can't talk back in a way that you want to, and they put you on report because they keep you on the defense. Mm. And I was full of fire, man. I couldn't hold my temper well like that. I could think well, but I get angry. I'm gonna say what I want to say, or fight who I want to fight. And of course, I got tired of being court-martialed and what they call Article 15s in the Army's captain mast in the Navy, man. That was just too much. And I didn't fight them when they told me they were gonna put me out for that. I just told them, okay, man, and I was gonna stay in California. And my father-in-law at the time was the Grand Master of the Masonic Lodge in this town. And he comes to my house one day and he says, "Al, you're going to have to leave." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Well, the chief of police has left my house. And he told me to tell you they're going to kill you if you don't leave." And I said, "Well, you tell the chief of police he got a gun and I got a gun. And we'll see who leaves first." And he tricked me down to his house and he called my father and told my father what the chief of police had told him. And my father started crying. I never heard my father cry. And he was begging me to come home. Please come home. Please come home. So I left. My father-in-law loaned me about $600 so I could hurry up and get out of town. That was a Wednesday. I talked to my father. Saturday morning, I was on my way back to Memphis. I came back to Memphis, bro, and I don't know how to describe what I stepped into. It was the Superfly age, and everybody was pimping, and they was pimping, they was sipping, or they was doing something, but that was what I was telling them. "Hey, man, what about the movement here?" And they was like, "Man, damn the movement, get your own and get the pimping." And I'm like, "But I don't want to be no pimp. I'm concerned about people I'm connected to. I don't want to be no pimp." But so I decided to check out. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Let me ask you a question. Now, I want you to continue on that path. I want to highlight some things on that path. Do you, even though you were on the west coast or western part of the country, right out of your element, can you explain to the people, or do you have any idea from the people what was the force that interjected that? Because it is a hell of a fall, a precipitous fall, as they would say, going from Black Power. You got Martin King. You got the Snick with Stokely Carmichael, a.k.a. Kwame Ture, and then you go from Huey Newton and that crew, and now you all the way down to Superfly and Pimpin' and Hoeing and Dope and that. What do you think contributed to that downfall?
Well, you know, there was a lot. First of all, you had the undercover hit. What I showed yesterday, Iceberg Slim Pimp. That was a big influence on my generation in particular. And then the films that they began to, they were just cranking them out, man. I mean, they was cranking them out just over and over about getting back at the man. But part of getting back at the man was exploiting your women, selling dope, and this became, it was like dressing up the outside. And the other thing that we began to hear that we hadn't heard before that, we were hearing Black Power, Black is Beautiful. We began to hear Black on Black crime. Check out Carl Rowan and Black, what's his name? Joe Black with Greyhound. Come later, find out they were funded by the CIA to do some of this stuff. We didn't know that. We didn't know about a COINTELPRO back then. It was happening, but we didn't. That was published much later. You know, people quote that all the time, COINTELPRO. We didn't. We thought, when I'm saying we collectively, we thought the FBI were the friends of the black man. Because that's who caught the killers of Goodwood Cheney and the civil rights workers in Mississippi that went missing and murdered. Well, the FBI that intervened. So we were under the impression that the FBI, the federal government, was the friend of the Negro. Certainly, we didn't know that they were antagonizing Bunchy Carter and Turinga on the college campus. Who would have thought that they were monitoring Dr. King's sex life? We had no idea that was happening, man. And what we later found out, they made great inroads in securing operatives in the civil rights movement right here in Memphis, Tennessee. The president, the executive secretary of the NAACP, and her husband were both FBI informants. This isn't a guess. We got the records. They were paid FBI informants. And man, that kind of takes the wind out your sail. And I found this out from a criminal court judge, Judge H.T. Locker, who was the first president of the Memphis NAACP. He was a business partner of my father's. And he just flat out told me that Maxine Smith and Vasco Smith were snitches to the FBI. And about 5 years later, it comes out in the newspaper that they were. So, I mean, we were compromised out the box and didn't know it, man. But to get to the hustling pimping part, I think also another part of that was kind of like preachers in a sense that they didn't have to work for anybody. And so I think it may have given some people a sense of independence, even though we know that they wasn't. But I mean, pimps weren't dependent upon some guy paying them a paycheck. And dope dealers back then in Memphis, that wasn't the creme de la creme of players. It was pimps and con men were like up there then. Dope dealers came on. Superfly is really the movie that fashioned dope dealers to be the big players in town. That was when it really became very popular. I know in Chicago y'all had the what do you call them, the lottery guys, but it wasn't called the lottery. The numbers. Yeah. Those are the big guys up in Chicago, man. And so when that stuff hit, nobody I think gave a concern about what this would say up to women about themselves, what it would say to their daughters about themselves, or the beginning of sending us to the penitentiary in mass. Almost all of my friends went to the penitentiary. I was just one of them ones that didn't get caught. That was it. I just left at the right time, or somebody in that crew cared enough about me to say, no, you got something else cut out for you, boy. You get your ass on way there. You ain't finna cut this cable with us. That happened to me so many times, man. And so by the time that era began to come to an end, city was like drained. It was like, man, I mean, what are we gonna do? Listen to this. Consider this. Over 450,000 people populate the city.
Mm.
The city population is 652,000. Metro is a little over a million. But in a city of this size, there's not one black business that employs over 100 people.
Mm.
That's an abomination. At one time, we had several black businesses that did that. There's very few successful black businesses in Memphis now. 30,000 black businesses in Memphis. 30,000. Most of them are single proprietorship. Don't make no money. They just got registered with the state. But because we have a black bank, but it has one branch.
Mm.
And I've been a member of it for 40-some years, and I'm about to have to do something different because they're 25 miles away.
Mm.
They don't have a branch close to me anymore. They closed all the branches down. And, by the way, a white woman runs.
You know, that right. What you just said strikes another chord in my head after last week finding out that the United Negro College Fund just hired the first black person to be the CEO last week.
Yeah.
And it's crippling. It's the constant we need somebody else in order to be validated syndrome. And it's heartbreaking, man. It's heartbreaking. Now we in the mid 70s. We got this pimping, this drug that they're starting this war on drugs that started really in the 60s, but now it's a war on drugs. The Black Power movement is starting to deteriorate. Where are you at in this situation now?
Well, I decided that I was going to explore better living through chemistry. So I started shooting heroin in California, actually. And I brought a ferocious dope habit back home with me. The problem was the dope wasn't as plentiful here or cheap as it was in California. And so I had this running battle of finding a good drug dealer, and then he getting arrested or the product stops. And so for about 10 years, that was what I dedicated my life to. In between, I hustled and, I sold little weed, stuff like that. But I wasn't satisfied. I was ashamed of myself, actually. It got real bad. I got a job with the Postal Service, but my drug habit had gotten real bad, man. I just made some stupid choices, and I remember walking down the street in Midtown Memphis one afternoon, and asking myself what was wrong and right, and I didn't know. That scared me because I could justify anything. When you're a dope fiend, you can justify anything, and I was asking myself, some serious person, is it wrong to rob? I don't know. I did not know. I'm not saying I just use this as the excuse. I did not know. I had crossed the line. And I didn't think I would ever be able to climb back out of that mindset. And one old partner of mine, man, who was like a apex hustler, a legend in the streets of Memphis, man, saw me one morning walking down an alleyway in Midtown. And I walked up on him, he looked over at me and he said, Aaron? I said, Joe? And he said, man, what happened to you? I said, what do you mean, what happened? He said, oh, man, I didn't bring you up to be dressed like this, man. I wore tailor clothes when I was a young man. I wanted to get a shoe when I was a young man. I knew how to hustle. I know how to shoot bad things and throw the red card. He told me all this stuff, and he's looking at me, and he figured out right away what had happened. He said, that dope man got changed. That was a shame, man, but he put me up on some stuff, and just had some real talks with me. He didn't kick me to the curb because I was so down in my luck. He came by my house and take me somewhere and, teaching me some different things. And so that kind of gave me hope again. And I went in treatment and I stopped shooting dope. And it's amazing what happens when you stop using hard drugs, man. And my faculties began to come back. And so it came to kind of like this, bro, Rap. I go to this symposium or something at it was a black college, Lemoyne College, and it was about crack cocaine in the neighborhood, in the community. And I don't know if you remember this football player by the name of Hollywood Henderson.
Yes, I do. Number 55, Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah. He started smoking crack. And he said that he would take crack and cook it up and then throw it up in the air. And all it landed on the ground, he let it stay there, because he knew eventually he's going to be looking on the rug trying to find some anyway. So I went to this symposium and I began to ask, because I saw a lot of people with dashikis on, I had never seen it like that. I was asking, what is this? The brother that took me, I just talked to today. I asked him, what are the dashikis about? And he was saying, well, it's like back to Africa kind of stuff. I was like, okay, I mean, but where are the militant folks? Well, they ain't like that no more, Al. And man, I was trying to find my footing. When I left, there still was some militancy, but you could tell it was kind of going away, but it was gone by then. It was replaced by the feel-good stuff, and I was like, yeah, that's cool, man, but something's missing here. So I decided before I stepped back into that, I needed to get something done for me. I had destroyed my family's their trust. I had just, oh man, I had left my wife and my children, so I had to go back and make reparations to them and amends. So I took that first 6 years and just worked on myself and my family, and establishing relationships with my family and my dad, my mom. And that's when my mother, right after this, my mother began to become politically active. And so she would ask me to just help her out. I had a pretty good gift of gab, I could write pretty good. And so she pulled me back into activism. And then on my job, now dig this, you'll love this. I'm a street guy, I'm a heroin addict, and you decide to make the union school. Bro, it was a match made in heaven, because they were not prepared for what I was willing to bring to that game. I got con under my belt. You can't intimidate me. I ain't afraid. I can probably outthink you. I can probably outwrite you. And so I started as a little alternate job steward, man. And I had 2 days a week that I was a union man. And within 4 years, I was vice president, full-time vice president, and chief organizer of that organization, man. And I know we changed the Postal Service. I know we changed the culture of the Postal Service, but I didn't think that I would have that same kind of impact on a portion of the city. I still knew that there was something going on inside of me that 12-step programs could not get under. And Lord knows I worked those steps. But still, there was a rage inside of me that would not come out to play. If you get what I'm saying.
I get you.
Yeah, and so my wife suggested that I get some professional help. And I went to a therapist, a sister by the name of Dr. Dorothy Jeffries, and she helped navigate me through some things, but it was in that she determined I needed an inpatient trauma flight. And this is an 8-day intensive inpatient where they do group therapy, group dynamics, psychodrama, this kind of stuff with you. And that was the beginning of a major change in my life, because I began to see me on a different level. Go ahead.
You know what? I want to talk to you about this segment of your life, because we see a lot of the results of this now. We, as a culture, as a society, we look at these young people, see the flaws in them, and we're quicker to cast them away than to offer them the assistance. What do you think changed in the mid-70s to the mid-2010s? Because in the mid-70s, what was the great part? What I always tell people is the great part is they never let us know that Uncle Al was a drug addict. They said Uncle Al drank too much. It was so you was thinking, oh yeah, he doing too much. Okay, I don't want to do that. But now kids are just, and he's a drug addict. He's worthless, and da 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 da. So what can we do as a society to get back to, you know what, our Uncle Al, our cousin Al, our brother Al, he done fell the wrong way. You got, because you said you had to reestablish yourself and re-earn your family's trust. To me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that means it was still people, reaching for you. You just had to reach back. Help me understand. Help me and the people who listen to understand.
Man, you just really. I think what happened was briefly with the disintegration of our community. You want to go back again to 1865 to 1965. We built the world, a nation within a nation. And we had all these things of support. We had them right there. And the law wouldn't allow us to go outside, so we were interdependent upon one another. Another thing that my father pointed out in some cities was there wasn't a retreat to the backyard yet. See, I live in the suburbs now, and I don't know a neighbor out here, and I've been living here 21 years because we lived on the patio. Mm-hmm. In the neighborhood, we lived on the front porch. You see what I'm saying?
I see. I know exactly what you're saying.
We were more prone to meet our neighbors, to have dialogue with our neighbors. Our children would introduce us to their friends' parents, and that started lifelong relationships that happened there. It has never happened out here where I live now. It has never happened. So that disintegration, 1968 was pivotal, not just Martin Luther King, but the Fair Housing Act was also enacted in 68. And so people with means who could leave, we didn't have a ghetto in Memphis in 1968, by the way. But people who wanted to move to a bigger place or a newer home and had the means, they did it. They weren't running away from anything. They was just trying to find a better place, a different place to live. They weren't running from crime. There wasn't no significant crime in our neighborhoods, not compared to now. If somebody got shot on a Tuesday in Memphis, it was the talk of the town. Man, they shot somebody on Tuesday. You could really, that was odd. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have benefit of knowing what was going to happen when we moved. The other part of it was there were no experts on integration. It had never happened. Nothing had ever been integrated. So nobody could come and say, now, when you integrate, you're going to have to, the drugstores are going to have to compete with Walgreens. Yeah, the medicine that black pharmacist, he will not be able to get that medicine for nearly the price as Walgreens, and see, he won't be able to compete. They're going to close. They didn't tell us any of it, that the insurance companies couldn't compete, that the hospitals couldn't compete, the grocery stores couldn't compete. They didn't tell nobody had been integrated. They just fake like they knew what was going to happen. All's going to be well once you integrate. Man, all hell broke loose when we integrated. They didn't want us in their schools. I got friends that got beat and spit on every day. Do you hear me? Every day at school. I'm like, man, how did you live through that? And so a lot of things happened, but certainly integration was one that really didn't work well for us. We got the short end of that stick seriously.
You know what, Al? I always do some history. This is awesome, man. This is an awesome interview. We're going to continue. I'm going to give these people a piece of history. It's going to be 5 minutes, and we will be back shortly.
I am a proud partner of Car Marshal. If you are interested in a new or used car, please check out Car Marshal. Click on the link in my description box below. No credit check, no cosigner. That's Car Marshal. How come the murders of Martin Luther King's mother and brother hardly ever get talked about? Of course, we all know what happened to MLK. But what happened to his mother and his brother? What really happened to the King family? Was their deaths due to hit jobs from someone higher up? Or were these separate incidents that had no connection with each other? Alberta King was shot and killed at the age of 69 in 1974. She was playing the organ during Sunday service at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. But who sent her killer, and why? Her killer was a young man named Marcus Wayne Chenault, who claimed that all Christians were my enemies, and black ministers were menace to black people. Marcus walked into the church and yelled out, "I'm taking over here." As he stepped towards the choir, he emptied 2 clips into Alberta King and 2 others. Marcus was arrested and pleaded insanity and said that he was on a mission to kill all Christians. Now, in the past, the government has used informants, lowlifes, and other despicable people to carry out hits for them. So this couldn't be too far-fetched to say that the government set this up. This guy, Marcus Wayne Chenault, was a weird individual that nobody had information on. Nobody knew much about this guy. Marcus was tried and convicted and sentenced to death by the electric chair, but it was reduced down to a life sentence because the King family opposed to the death penalty. And Marcus died of a stroke while incarcerated in 1995. Alfred Daniel King, who was known as A.D. King. He was the younger brother of MLK, and less than a year after MLK's assassination, A.D. died mysteriously in a swimming pool. A.D. was killed shortly after a telephone conversation he had with someone. A.D.'s daughter, Alveda King, overheard him say, "They killed my brother, and I'm going to find out who did it." A.D. was also heavily involved in the civil rights movement. According to Alveda, Daddy was killed, and they put him in that pool. She said when the paramedics pumped his chest, no water came out. One of the emergency people said that he was dead before he even hit the water. After identifying his body in the morgue, they also came to that same conclusion. A.D.'s wife, Naomi King. Naomi King said that he was an excellent swimmer, and there was no water in his lungs. He was in a fetal position. He had bruises on his forehead. He had rings around his neck, and he was also in his underwear. A.D. cause of death was by drowning. His death was ruled a drowning. But Naomi King and Alveda King, his wife, his daughter, and everyone else around him all say that he was an excellent swimmer. So he was an excellent swimmer, and he just happened to drown. He drowned with bruises on his forehead, rings around his neck, in his underwear, and he was in the fetal position. But they say no foul play was in his death. But how do you drown when there's no water in your lungs? Thanks for watching. Make sure you hit the thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe. And let me know what you think in the comment section.
Thank you for returning. Well, thank you for staying. We are back. This is the End of the Bench podcast along with my great new friend, Sir, Mr. Al Lewis. Mr. Lewis, I'm glad you were able to see that. I'm glad my people were able to see that. And a lot of people's like, we need this kind of information. That's why I continue to do this. I retired as a sports guy. I was like, hey, man, I don't want to just talk about sports anymore. I want to talk about my folks. And this is what leads us to you. Thank you for continuing to share your life story. Please continue.
Well, I want to thank you, man. I mean, even for that broadcast there, I didn't know that about A.D. King's, about his death. I knew it was some mystery around it. I knew he had drowned. So I said, I knew he was in his underwear, for instance. You know, I was a young person when that happened. I was younger, brother. Mm-hmm. I remember distinctly Mrs. King being murdered that Sunday because they broke into the television and announced it. Mm-hmm. She had been done. As a matter of fact, I think he went on to Martin Luther King Sr. went on to keep preaching after she was pronounced dead. He finished his ceremony.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean that's what I said. Wow. But that's odd.
Yeah, man.
You know, no water in his lungs, and I kept thinking, okay, they kept saying there's no water in his lungs. Certainly they're not going to say that was a drowning.
Right.
You know, I was really surprised when at the end they said that it was ruled a drowning. But you know, back then there was no consequence for stuff like that. I mean, okay, you say it's a drowning and we don't like it, but what are we gonna do? It's not like today. If something like that happened, they'd be all over. They might even burn the police station down today. I don't have an opinion on that one way or other. I mean, people do what they do in the moment, and I understand that. I just have to be careful what I say here.
Hey, trust me, I'll say it way worse. They gonna get me then.
But
for the record, I can swim too.
You know, they said William Monroe Trotter jumped out of a window to his death. Like this man everything was looking good for him, and all of a sudden he just decides to take a dive out of his window. You know, now I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But again, all of that stuff collectively sends a message to you also.
Yes, it does.
Oh man, a deep message. It's like, if I do this, in all probability, I'm going to be murdered. The Memphis Police Department was commissioned in 1828, a former, and I'm using their words, slave patrol. It has never changed its mission. It is an occupying force and a force of assassins. And you know, that's just the way I see it. And you know, I know personally the police commissioner. We've had some dialogue. We've had some engagement where it ended up in the shouting match with them where we walked out. As a matter of fact, they got a ABC or Channel 13 local news filmed me coming out giving them a mouthful. I didn't know they were in the bushes. Coming out of this meeting we had with the command staff a couple of years ago, man, and the NAACP headquarters. And brother, let me tell you something. I was so disappointed with the local NAACP chapter, what they did to us in that meeting. I don't think I'd ever walk in their headquarters again under any circumstances. They told me to come get a $30,000 check. They can keep the check. That's the way I feel about what they did to us, man. So again, you always have this shock of here we are working, we're doing everything, we put our hearts on the line, we ain't getting a dime, and here you come and inject yourself in something. Here's an example I'll give you, and this fits right into what we're saying. 2016, on the heels of is it Castile, the brother that got murdered in Minnesota?
Philando Castile.
Yes, and then the brother that they killed in Baton Rouge.
for selling the DVDs. I can't think of his name right now.
They have, both of them was on camera.
It was almost back. I think it was back-to-back weeks.
It was back to back. And so organically on that Sunday, it started coming on Facebook and all these things. We're gonna meet in front of the FedEx Forum or the Civil Rights Museum, and we're gonna determine what we're gonna do. And I think that they thought that maybe 50, 60 people would show up. Bro, it was 3,000 people showed up down there. And a young friend of mine, he's in his 30s now. His name is Keidron Franklin, TNT, we call him. And he's the one that got me re-involved in the movement. The guy I was telling you about that called me and said, hey, man, I want you to give us some help. Well, anyway, so I followed him down there. And so our group, Edward Journey, is some older cats. We formed perimeter security because we're armed. And so we don't carry our guns outside. We conceal, but because they had the Mississippi militia down there trying to antagonize people. So what we did was just withstood with the militia. So everywhere they moved, our folks would move. You get it? We weren't taking no water from them. They trying to give you water, and then they ask you, so, man, we was turning them up, and that was our job. Well, anyway, the gathering turned to a march, and they took off headed toward the police station, but they made, instead of a right to go to the police station, they made a left and went up on this big bridge, I-40 bridge, and took it for 6 hours. Mm. They say it cost the surrounding areas and the city way up in the tens of millions of dollars. Mm. The next day, because Keidron had spoken with the police director, his name is Mike Rollins, he asked Keidron, he said, look, man, can you ask these people to come off this bridge? Because this is going to get dangerous. And Keidron says, only if we can meet with the mayor and you afterwards. So the idea was to go down back into the front of the forum and have this meeting, but it was so late at night they decided not to, that they would do it the next day at this church called Greater. But we didn't know when they were going to do it. I'm sorry. They said they would call her and let him know. Meanwhile, him and a couple of buddies of him that morning came over and asked me to meet them at the McDonald's, and they asked me would I mediate the meeting. So, man, I'm honored as heck. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, yes, I would be happy to. I'd be elated to. Because you all did something that hadn't happened in this city, in the history of this city. Let's be real clear about that. Mm-hmm. So, man, so he came over to the house, and we began to plot out. I said, now, look, we got to get there first and get there early. Because I got a feeling there's going to be some kind of double cross here. So we got there an hour early, we thought. But they already had the dais set up on the stage. They had the 10 cards of all the people that were going to participate in the conversation. And guess what? Not one of the activists that shut the bridge down, including him, had a name card on the dais. Mm. I started reading some of the name cards, and I'm going, wait a minute. These are preachers. They had a choir stand full of other preachers. And I went to one of the preachers I did have a relationship with. He was over Push Rainbow here. And I say, man, if you all don't put some 10 cards up here for these young activists, they ain't coming, and we're going to turn this sucker out. I didn't say sucker, I said something else.
Right.
And he says, well, hold on, Al. I'll get some chairs up here and stuff. I said, alert from alert manager. I said, this Mac can't connect to iCloud because of a problem with AARMNLORENZOLS at AOL.com. That's my son's computer talking. Anyway, so they hurriedly put some tit cards and stuff up there, and I engaged the police director as he was coming in. And so he wasn't the police director, he was the acting police director. You got me? This is important that you hear this. And so when they got up there, then they began to tell the audience how they were going to, the arrangement, that they would have to send questions in, and they would pick a question, and they would field the question to the dais and stuff like that. But that wasn't the agreement. Nobody had met with us to ask us how we were going to agree for the engagement. And so then they changed it. They said, well, no, we're not going to allow any questions. And so it began to feel real shady. Well, here's what happened, man. What those preachers did, in particular, Reverend Bill Atkins and Reverend Skippy, I like to call this other guy, Devontae Hill, he's a sham charlatan activist preacher that ain't got no church or no following, but he inserts himself into this stuff, and their aim is to get Rollins promoted to full police director. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I ain't too up on choosing my execution. Quite frankly, I don't care who the hangman is. I just don't want to get hung. So I'm thinking, I'm sitting here and I'm appalled because I'm thinking about these 3,000 people put their lives on the line up on this bridge, and this is the best ass that you have, that you promote this man to police director. He is not the first black police director. We've had several black police, so it's nothing special about him, but they hijacked the efforts of those people just to get that. And he's been the worst police director that this city has had. He's leaving this month with all of his stats are low. They just be sub-level. But anyway, again, this is the evidence of the kind of operatives. What's that word? They like to use. It's a phrase they call guys like that. Subversive.
I know the phrase you're talking about. Give me a second. And the guy we've been thinking about is Alton Sterling.
Alton Sterling, that was him. Yeah. Agent Provocateurs.
Agent Provocateurs. I could not think of it. Yes.
Yeah, and so it has been fraught with that over and over. Is like when we're taking a good step, they insert these people in the equation, and just to go to show you, they're getting another police director in Memphis now. They're interviewing the candidates. Guess who they put on the interviewing panel?
Who was that?
Same two guys. I swear to God, it was so insulting that they would do that. And this guy is, and when I say a sharp, I'm not making up he's a sharp. He's filed false police reports claiming somebody stole his laptop when it hadn't happened. I mean, just slimy kind of stuff, man. Both of them have dubious characters. And so this is what, that has always happened in our community. That they have a preacher police force now, we call them. When stuff happens, they have this list of preachers that they call out and tell their congregation, don't go there. I'm serious, man. When we were doing protests and operations, we didn't call out, we called them operations. They will send out a blast to these, tell your people to avoid the bridge. Tell your people to, I'm like, wait a minute, are you working for the police department? And that is up to right now. Because we embarrass them so bad, they stopped coming out to the demonstrations. Because, they would come out and they would try to calm things down. Well, bro, when we got through with them, they didn't never want to come where we was anymore. Because we just told them what they were. But anyway, this is, they have such a low opinion of us, is that they think that'll work now, and it doesn't work anymore. And again, I'm saying that these young people, man, are gallant. I mean, like, they got some real fire. And I respect that. I've never tried to be that. I've never tried to be the hip old guy or nothing. Mm-hmm. But I am a hip old guy in that they respect me, and I love that they respect me because I respect them. I listen to what they have to say. If they ask me for some feedback, I don't give advice. If they ask me for some feedback, I'll be a faithful translator of my thoughts, of what I think. I'm not so hooked upon my thoughts that they got to do what I say do. But I must say that I have been somewhat of an influence in strategy and tactics of some things we did. And getting back to now mainstream, I just wanted, before I forgot that, when it leads us up to now this 1991.
Okay.
Finally, it looks like we're going to get some traction in politics. Now, understand, we are in the midst of the crack epidemic. On top of that, the gangs begin to get a foothold in Memphis. Memphis didn't have gangs prior to the late 80s. If they were, nobody but them knew about it.
Right.
You see what I'm I'm saying? And so that wasn't a big issue, but now we began to, those that knew what graffiti was, began to see graffiti and read it. And we had some brothers out of Chicago that knew exactly what the graffiti was saying. You got me? And some of them was pulling my coat, like, hey man, you know what that top hat tail, the cane and all that? I think I've seen it before. They would explain to me what that was. And so they began to try to engage the people to tell them, look, there's something bad happening here. We began to engage the administrations about the crack epidemic. We were trying to explain to them, there's a new drug that's hit. And here I am, a recovering dope fiend. And by this time, I'm an EAP counselor on my job. I'm working in the community trying to help people identify what addiction is and how it works. And so we don't vilify these people because they need treatment. Mm-hmm. The problem with crack was, H, the treatment centers didn't know how to treat crack initially. They were scrambling trying to get recovering crack addicts to come in so they could have a voice when crack addicted people would come into treatment. And they didn't quite have their feet under them on how to treat it. They were, really to be frank, I think they were afraid. I think racism and discrimination played a part of that because most of the treatment centers were owned by white people or ran by white people. So we got a problem right there.
Okay.
You got me? And so...
lack of empathy?
Yes. They were really trying to recruit some of us who had a little time on us, trying to recruit us to come in. But they wasn't paying enough money for me. I was like, no, I make way more money than that doing what I'm doing, and I'm working in the field, so no, I don't want to work in the treatment center. But some people did, but it takes a long time to get certified. And I'm just going to show how racism works, man. Let me tell you what they did in the state of Tennessee. To get your certification, when I first got in the field, you had to have like 500 contact hours, which could be AA meetings or NA meetings. There was no Cocaine Anonymous quite yet. They were just starting it. But something like that, or you talking to clients or something. And after you got your 500 hours, then you could take the test, right?
Okay.
When it became apparent that they were going to have to elicit the help of black recovering people into these fields, you know what they did to the requirements? 2,000 contact hours, 4,000 contact hours. That's taking you 10 years to get certified, or 5 years rather, to get certified to make a decent salary. So they have you on as a monitor or something. You're doing the same thing, but you ain't getting the same money. That's how racism works, man. You know, and so a lot of people with their ability was like, man, I'm not going to work over there for $8 an hour. You don't know where I'm going to do that. So I wanted to show that that's another part of this component. It's in layers. It's impacted everywhere. And the crack epidemic just literally just swept through our city, and it left vibrant, beautiful neighborhoods empty shells of themselves. It looks like Beirut, and I am not exaggerating. If you've been to Detroit, well, that's the way Memphis looks. If you go to the Queen of Soul's house right now, you'll probably see a tarp. She was born here in Memphis. You'll probably see a tarp on the back of the house. And they're fixing it up a little now. But the neighborhood is dilapidated. I mean, like, if they made it a shrine, who's going to come in that neighborhood where you might get your car broke in, you might get robbed? You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is the inner city of Memphis. That's what it's turned to. However, in 91, it had promise. We had a people's convention where if you were running for office, you had to win a seat at the people's convention. So, and you had to sign off that you would not run in the race unless you won the seat in the people's. You got what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so that's how we were able to pull it off. And I was involved in that. I was there. I was helping. It was fun, man. You know, like at last we organized again. We got something going. And the only reason Willie Harrington won, you see, and I share this a lot with people, we didn't elect Willie Harrington mayor. We elected a black man mayor. Whoever would have gotten that, we were going to vote for like that. He just had the best organization at the convention to get the support.
Mm-hmm.
The guy, I wasn't voting for Willie Harrington. I was voting for Otis Higgs. And I called him that night because he didn't win. And I called him. I said, well, do you plan on running? He says, no, man, I'm not going to run. I said, well, good. I'll support Harrington if you're not going to run. And so that happened with a lot of people. Remember, he only won by 145 votes.
Wow.
Remember? Yeah.
And that was his second or third time running, right?
His first time.
Oh.
And they tried to steal the votes.
Mm.
They every time they would do a new count, his lead would diminish. So like when he was 700 out there, they would do a recount. He'd come back, he'd be 520. They'd do a recount. He'd come back, he'd be 340. Until Harold Ford Sr. pulled a move on it. It was the smoothest move. He told me later, I asked him what he do. He went in the count room and he says, he asked the guy over the election commission, O.C. Douglas was his name. He says, O.C., they got him on news. O.C., this is serious business. I want to know what you all are doing. And so O.C. told him. And so a few minutes later, Harold Ford walks out and says, it's over, we won. Well, I never knew what happened in that room. So a year later or something, I was talking to him over a friend of mine's house. He was there. He was the congressman. And I asked him, I said, man, tell me what happened in the count room. He says, well, I saw what they were doing, that they were stealing the votes. They were chipping the votes away. He said, so what happened when I asked them that time what was the lead, they said 142. I just turned around and opened the door. He said, I told him this. He said, you see all those people out there? And man, it was packed. The lobby was packed. The cars had driven and blocked off the election commission all the way around the whole block. They had stopped their cars, got out of their cars, so they had them surrounded. And he says, I want to ask y'all something. When you steal this election, how you going to get out of here alive?
Yeah.
And he turns around and says, it's over, y'all, we won. And so now, even if they want to steal it, they can't steal it. And I want you to know that Harrington didn't return that favor in kind to Mr. Harold Ford Sr. because when they had indicted him for some stuff, and he was asking Harrington just to come to the courtroom to support him, and Harrington wouldn't come, and they didn't think the government would get a fair shake if the jury came from Memphis. So they bust in 12 white jurors from the rural areas, and they found that brother not guilty. Yeah. They in fact said, we can't find a thing he did to break the law. And Harrington wasn't there to support him. And so, all of that stuff, man, chips away, erodes, and our confidence and stuff. We had a good run for about 8 years again until Tennessee Walls came. They arrested some of the original players in this stuff. The replacements, some of them were okay, but they were in shock, I'm sure. They were traumatized. And then race politics came in. I mean, white people buying off black people, black candidates. We got a few decent candidates on our city council right now. A few, but not enough to do the stuff that needs to be done in the city. Because I'm going to say it again, they are afraid. And I mean, I'm not guessing. Because I still meet with them on occasion. I talk to them one-on-one, and they just go flat-foot tell me that they're afraid they'll get killed if they ask the right questions. I've had them actually sit in my face and tell me. And my retort is always, why'd you take the job? I mean, if you were afraid, this ain't the job to take, because what we need is people that aren't afraid. You don't have to be that articulate, but you need to have some courage in this job. So, yeah, man, it's been an interesting lick. And in the midst of this all, I think the thing that I loved the most was I was able to, with some other brothers, create this organization called Inward Journey. And we created an initiation called the Underground Railroad Training Odyssey, where we take brothers and sisters back through slavery and undo the psychic stain, the emotional damage, the wording, the messages that is sent forward. We help mitigate and repair those souls and honoring our ancestors all the while we're doing this, because they require that we do this, man. And I want you to hear me, man. I am a practical man. I don't believe in much. I'm one of them guys, you got to show it to me. I want to touch it. I I want to measure it, right? So I ain't one of them guys that go for a lot of spooked out stuff. I'm just ain't. I'm not saying I believe or don't believe. It's just hard to convince me of something. But man, I remember driving in the cotton fields down in Mississippi and having to stop, and I was on my knees crying like a baby, asking my ancestors, "What do you want from me?" And what they told me was to not be forgotten. And I could hear with weeping eyes. And I put myself in that position that you talking about going back to Africa. You're talking about wearing your African garb, but you gonna forget me and my sacrifice? What I had to put up and endure with these sociopaths and these psychopaths that starved and beat and raped me, you gonna dare forget me just to wear a kufi? That was, I made a commitment and a vow that I'm not going to uphold the institution of slavery, damn slavery. But those weren't slaves, those were people, man. And I don't call my ancestors slaves. Those were people and some gods back then.
Yes.
And so, people ask me, well, what? I said, listen, they went into the interior of Africa and kidnapped and stole free people who live back by consent. They brought them through empires who helped them go back there with the threat of a gun. And understand, man, a gun is a powerful thing today. Can you imagine people never having heard a gunshot? What they would think? They brought them to the Western Hemisphere, unloading them in the Caribbean to help break their spirits and their souls, brought them over to this landmass, worked them almost to death or to death, never fed them enough. Wasn't that old idea of fat mammy? That wasn't a lot of fat mammies. They wasn't eating like that. They talk about Hattie McDaniel. I just saw a special about it. That she's an archetype of the woman that took care of Massa. They didn't look like that.
No, not at all.
No, they didn't look like that. And so that happy donkey bullshit that they like to promote about it, wasn't that happy about that, man. That was horror. That was absolute horror and terror that those people were living under. And so I just chose I would honor them in a whole other way. And so we created this thing we call the Underground Railroad Odyssey. And that is, of course, it is about the institution of slavery. We're not denigrating anybody. We're not denigrating so-called white people or black people. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is painting the historical facts of the institution and how the people were treated, so we can see if there's a visceral reaction that we can help people now facilitate and process those feelings and those emotions and those negative self-judgments about ourselves, and to come to a point of mitigation and healing that stuff, so we don't pass it on to our babies, man.
That goes right into that trauma thing that we were talking about on Collective Perspective Sunday. And a lot of people are not aware of this, man, that, the beating that our great-great-great-grandfather got for doing something simple is embedded in us. It rolls through our veins. And without organizations like yours that will address those things, we will continue to do it. Like, I recently was having a conversation and was telling people, like, we keep looking at these kids. I mean, these crazy, they're wild, they're this, they're that. But that's the trauma that you just spoke about from the crack era, when your mother was a drug addict and your mother was getting beat and your father was subjugated to looking horrible. Now it's manifesting itself with this, how I believe is manifesting itself in this over-indexing in fashion, over-indexing in cars, over-indexing in foolish things like this, $3,000 phones, and you ain't read a book since Ned in the First Reader. See, run, Ned, run. You ain't did none of that. But and people are acting as if these things aren't important. And I'm so glad that your organization addresses this and brings about the knowledge of who we were. Because as I consistently say on my shows, we talking about 400 years. That's not even a paragraph in world history.
Oh, no, not at all. This is listen, if you look at it, just something many of us here probably do it. My grandfather's father was owned by his father.
Thank you.
You know what I'm saying? So
yes.
It don't lead back for me at all. Because here's what happens, man. What I was seeing in the 60s when I was a caddy, at a country club, right? What I was seeing was the ways of enslaved people. It was just 1967. But you know, I came out of the Navy and I got a job at National Cemetery. And so the boss was taking me around in the dump truck showing me what I was going to do. And I swear to God, man, a brother walks up to the truck, he takes his cap off, and he says, Mr. Scruggy, you just went to the bathroom again. And I was thinking, what the hell am I? What? You know, or here's one that I share with people. I was in a cafeteria in one of those lines where you walk up, you know, it's a steam table, and you got a tray. And so I walked up to the salad section. I was first in line, and there was a short white guy next to me, and a sister walks up and looks at me, and he looks at him and says, "May I help you?" And I looked at her and I said, "Whoa, wait, you didn't see me standing here?" She said, "Well, I said, yes, you know. You knew I was here first, and I'm not going to let you undignify me like that." For him, and he spoke up. Well, you see, I said, "I wasn't talking to you. Shut up." So he shut up. So me and his sister had a dialogue, and I told her, I said, "I understand. Trust me, I understand what just happened to you right there. But don't let that ever happen to you again. You lose your dignity when you do that, sister." That's some old shit, man. Excuse me. That's some old stuff.
No, you fine. We don't have no guidelines like that.
One Sunday after church, when I was going to church, we stopped at this place called Holly's Fashions. And when we walked in the store, there was this white woman, assistant manager, I found out behind the counter. And man, she was losing it, man. She was talking to her employees and the customers so disrespectful and dismissively. You know, just haughty about it. And so I was transfixed, and I stood there and I watched. And my wife is really the very calm one of this couple. You know, she's always thoughtful and pensive. And so when she walked up, I said, "Catherine, would you look at this woman?" And I thought she was going to say, "Al, leave that alone. Don't get mixed up in this. You know what's going to happen." And she watched, and I'll never forget, she said, "She's crazy as hell." So she told the woman, she says, "Hey, lady, you're fucked up." But listen, there had to be 10, 11 black women in line. And each one of them that was going over that counter was getting a full measure of what this woman was dishing out. And so I turned and I looked at her, man, and I said, "Sister, don't undignify yourself by letting this woman talk to you like this. You don't have to buy this shit. It's cheap. You can go to another holiday. They got about 30 of them in the city. Don't let her talk to you like that." You know what they did to the person? They held their heads down and they kept buying that shit. And I knew something was seriously wrong, man. Seriously wrong with our people. And I made this commitment that on my watch, and still as long as I can have a say so, I am going to challenge that. I'm going to challenge it inside of me. I'm going to challenge it inside of you in every way I can. I'm going to ask the question, what made you do that? You know, what's going on with you right now? I don't want to shame you. What makes you stand here and say, it couldn't be that $10 blouse you got? It couldn't be.
Not at all. And you know what's funny? That reminds me of was a historic figure. His name is John Horse. He's primarily known as helping the Seminole Indians fight off President Andrew Jackson, which started the Trail of Tears. But before he got run down, he was the product of a person who enslaved the sister and the enslaved sister's child. So he had a few additional freedoms that the natural person wouldn't have. And he used to walk through town and do exactly what you did. He said if he saw a brother walking down with his head down, he might actually put hands on you if you don't straighten up and walk like a man. And this is in the 1600s, 1700s. He ain't played no games.
Always been some bad niggas. Always.
Yeah.
I tell them stories about them so people can hear. Always been men with dignity.
Yes.
Always. Don't never let them tell you all our people were subservient acting and all that. That's not true.
Right.
That's not true. I know it. You know, I ask people ask me, why won't you call them slaves? I said, well, I can tell you this for one. I could not be the progeny of slaves. That's impossible. Not the way I think.
Right.
And nobody got me to think like this. I observed the behavior of my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I couldn't behave in a subservient manner to anybody. So that couldn't have come from slaves. See, slaves are either snitching or bound. People are fighting or running.
Mm-hmm.
See, they're either runaway slaves. Slaves don't run away. Slaves see the boss where Denmark Vesey is hiding or where Nat Turner. There ain't no boss here under there. That's what slaves do. Now, they got some slaves today. But I know you ain't no slave. I know you couldn't be the progeny of slaves. Not the way you talk. You know, slaves don't talk like that.
Not at all.
No, sir.
Not at all. And that's the thing, man. Like you said, and I'm telling you, I've been saying it for the longest. You keep calling our folks slaves. You keep creating this fake history. Like it was this Negro conference in 1820. People like Langston Hughes' grandfather, W.B. Du Bois' grandfather was there. These were people who were walking around free in 1820. One of the young brothers who played for the Cleveland Browns, Suggs, his father and his brothers created a town in Georgia that still stands to this day. The church that they built is still there to this day. And all you hear about is Chicken George and Step and these dudes who used to, yes, boss, and that's all you see. So you think, hey man, the only way we can get past this, nah. You know, and one of the things that really annoys me is the fact that we live in this world. We live in this world that we try to make excuses for everybody. Oh well, see, they didn't mean it like that. But when you hear those things, that's what you process. It's like, oh well, I didn't mean for this to be a glass of wine, but I ain't mean for wine to be in the punch, but you got the bottle like this. It's just, man, it's sickening. And I just get, it fuels me though. I will tell you that. Like the day that I met you, it's the 51st anniversary of the death of my father and my aunts, his sisters, and my mom's sisters and relatives. Tell me, man, if we didn't know better, we would know. We would assume that you were raised by your father, and that's exactly what you're talking about.
You mentioned about when we were talking, was it Saturday or Sunday? You mentioned about
epigenetics. Yep.
Epigenetics, and that there's a function of that. Is that also suggests that as trauma gets passed on in the genes, so does courage
and pride.
So does indignation gets passed on. I came out indignant.
Yeah.
Not me. You can take this if you wanna. Not me.
Yeah. And I want to, bro. That's why, man. I'm enjoying this. I'm getting a boatload of texts, man. They thanking you. They are thanking you for sharing. And man, it's just, I needed you, man. And I, like I said, man, I call myself a retired sports guy. But I love talking about sports. You started off with me on the barbershop. One of my friends, he just became friends with me on Facebook. He's the reason I really started delving into sports, because one day he was like, yeah, I was averaging 25.4 points a game. And I was like, what is 0.4? And he was like, sometimes I 25, sometimes I get 24. And after that, I delve into sports. But then along the way, I guess it was the spirit of my dad. It's like I picked up that Malcolm X book. Then I noticed, what I noticed, man, my mother was insanely religious, right? But we had no pictures of Jesus and God on the wall. We rarely went to church. We went to Bible study. She made us go to Bible study every Friday, but we never went to church. And the most seminal moment of my life is when I turned 12, August 6, 1982, at about 7:30 in the morning. My mother came in my room, handed me a box. It was my birthday. And she was like, hey, I'm getting ready for church. I hated church. You getting ready for church? I was like, yeah. And she was like, you ain't got to go to church. According to the Lord, you're responsible for your soul. I'm going to heaven. You better make sure you get there. And after that, it was just learning and on my own, man. So, I appreciate you, man. And, we're about to wrap it up now, but man, I just want to continue to thank you. And man, if you want to come every week and talk to us, man, you are welcome. You have a seat at the table into perpetuity, man, because we need this. You just, man, you know what you are. You was a bunch of vegetables, a bunch of fruit, and a bunch of water, and we just ingested it. And now you cleaning us out. And that last bit right there about we're not slaves, that it's inside of us. Everybody who listens to my show, I can guarantee you, they have a little edge to them. People have looked at them sideways and says, oh man, here you go again. And that's why, because we wasn't willing to stand on that plantation. And if we did stand on that plantation, we was like, if he blink, if he sneeze, I'm running.
I'm gone.
Yeah. Right.
No, sir. And that's the whole point. I mean, we do an exercise when I work with Dr. Black. We do this exercise about the word slave. We ask them, you ever look up the etymology of slave? And it gets to the word Slav.
Yeah.
And so Slavic speaking people, but when they came here, Snuffy Smith couldn't say Slav. He said slave. But I don't think people from Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia and Russia and Poland and all, I don't think they look like me.
Exactly.
They look like me. So how the hell am I a slave? I ain't your slave. I'm a person. I'm a human. And because you were a slave, you say, I happen to know the history of England. I happen to know how they treated the peons, the subjects, the yeomen. I know how that they could ride horses. That the night of the night of kings allowed the king or the duke or the viscounts to go into the homes of the men about to be married and have their fiancés first. They had first dibs at the woman before they did. How you gonna tell me you free and a man can come lay with your woman with impunity? How are you free? You couldn't own any land. You couldn't even ride a horse. And now you get sent from your penitentiaries, from your insane asylums, the companies established post over here. You come over here, wipe out all of the people over here, even kill the bison. You're so heinous and sociopathic, and now you want to convince me you were free? No way.
Right.
No way.
You are, as you just spoke about, an Asian provocateur.
Ain't no doubt.
Exactly. So yeah, man, like we talked about Sunday, all this nonsense about the pilgrims being so nice and kumbaya and everybody. No, they came over here and started eating each other.
They dug them out of the grave.
Yes.
Because they were too lazy to put food up and do the crops, to do the required work. It's 1619, and so when times got hard, they didn't have nothing to eat. They didn't know how to take care of themselves. They dug their grave. They're dead about the grave. That's fact. Ain't nobody making this up.
Right. So yeah, man. Again, sir, thank you. I'm gonna end this show, and I'm gonna want you to hold while I end it. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, man. It has been an extreme pleasure. And like I told y'all, when I stopped doing sports, I said I was gonna bring everybody from all walks of life. We need to hear from every single solitary person. If you know somebody, you know how to get in contact with me. Facebook, Brian D. Williams, Brian BRIAND Williams. On Instagram and on Twitter at HRap_B. I chose that name for a purpose. I'm loud, I'm bombastic, I'm in your face. So was he. Hopefully he'll be let out of that Georgia prison for nothing, as usual. Just like Geronimo Pratt, just like our sister Asada, just like Mumia. but we don't want to get, that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But I really appreciate you guys. Again, please hit that like button, hit that share, subscribe to the network on Spreaker.com, built for this network. Subscribe to the YouTube page, The End of the Bench, The End of the Bench. Y'all, I don't feel like going through it all. Build and Destroy is the name of the show. I appreciate y'all. And as usual, it's all serious, but I'm going to end with something. Well, I'm going to end seriously with a little joke. Reggie O'Shea, he's transitioned now, a.k.a. Combat Jack, former lawyer, used to say, dream your dreams and man up a woman up and live your dreams, because life without dreams flows in black and white. Life with dreams flows in Technicolor surround sound. If you didn't like anything my brother Al Lewis said, I need you to...
You better shut your white mouth. I'm not kidding you.
And then, as my man Craig Smith say, if I owe you something, I don't have it. And if you need it, get it from God. All right.
We are built for this network, for the strong, not the weak.
Yep, this is my podcast. We are live and direct every Tuesday and Saturday.